today to have the opportunity to sit and talk to someone who I respect, someone who I know the community respects as a strong, powerful person, not only in politics, but in the black community, Miss Marilyn Mosby.
Thank you for having me, Stokey.
I mean, you know,
it's a mutual respect.
Right.
I understand that.
I slept, prayed about asking you to talk about things that I know are problematic to me and troublesome to not only the black community, Baltimore as a whole. I mean, I can talk all day long about violence and things that have plagued our community, but most of what I learned is not necessarily one person's responsibility. You have been in this position for far too long not to know the rules and the games people play to try to tarnish our reputation and make it seem that it's one way or another. But I want to talk strictly about you as a person. I think, you know, from what I know and what I've seen over the years, your mom, your wife, I think you come from a law-abiding citizen family tree. I think your father maybe was into politics or politics or something of that nature, you know. And, you know, I met you a long time ago in the recreation center when you first made it known that you was running for district attorney. And I was amused because as a black man, when I see black women, sometimes they be in a subordinate role. And you were so strong and thorough and superior that there was no doubt in my mind, whatever you was about to do, you were going to do well. And, you know, I don't think you let me down, I don't think you let the city down. Unfortunately, we live in a time where things don't always go as planned, you know. But, you know, I want to know from you, how does it feel? What is the day-to-day life for you right now? I mean, currently, it's dealing with all the stress and all the agony, you know. What is it like for you when you wake up in the morning?
So, I mean, and I appreciate the question. Again, there's mutual respect. I love how you advocate for our community. This is something that I'm very impassioned about, and I've always been impassioned. And before I get to my day-to-day, I guess I would just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Boston. I come from 4 generations of police officers. Right? My grandfather was one of the founding members of the first black police organization in Massachusetts. So my mother, my father, my uncles, all of them were police. But when I was about 14 years old, my cousin, who grew up with me like a brother, we lived right next door to my grandparents across the street. And just like any major urban city in America, even when you come from a police family, you're not shielded from violence. And he was killed right outside of my home in broad daylight when he was mistaken as a neighborhood drug dealer. His name was Duran, and they were looking for Dion. And like to this day, that's still an image that's branded in my mind because I opened up the door and I seen him laying dead in the streets. And if it wasn't for a neighbor who cooperated with police, testified in court, my family wouldn't receive any sort of justice. But that was my first introduction to the criminal justice system. And having to go into the courtrooms and seeing the number of black men going in and out in chains and shackles, I said, what is the system and how best do we reform it?
Now, before I say this, are you a Boston Celtics fan?
I am a Boston Celtics fan. I am. Only because Baltimore doesn't have a team. We don't have a team. We don't have a team. But I am not a Patriots fan. In my family, they still send me nasty text messages. I am all Ravens.
I have to admit, when Kevin Durant and Paul Pierce and Garnett played for, when Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen guys, I was a Boston fan, but I've always been a Tom Brady fan, so I was a New England Patriots fan.
Oh my goodness.
But by default, because Baltimore didn't have a football team, and then people get on me about following Tom Brady. But that's interesting because, you know, violence in the black community is all over the country, you know, all over the world for that matter. And I mean, a lot of times people wear their pills and their sleeve. I myself have been traumatized because I see things happening in the city every single day that some folk would normalize as happening in Iran and Iraq, you know.
Right.
And you have to try to have tough skin, especially when you're raising children, you know, because you are mine, you know, and you live in one of the most controversial cities and not dangerous because the neighborhood that me and you have lived in and without giving details is actually a pretty good neighborhood. I know 2 sides of Baltimore, right? And sometimes we don't necessarily get the chance to see the good side because the media, as we know, they make money off telling.
They absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we know about the media, and they control the narrative for our city so much, and that's what pays, right? Like city in crisis and talking about the negativity. But all of that is intentional. We know historically that's what they've attempted to do in order to create this environment and this perception that we're criminals and to keep us as deemed second-class citizens.
But for me, you're very popular. And you know, I used to think that I was popular, but you're very popular. You're very well liked. You're very well respected. And
not by everybody.
well,
not on Fox 45. Right?
But again, you know, we all know what that's about, because I honestly believe that if you wasn't into politics, you would be sort of like a neighborhood demagogue. Women will look up to you. They will follow you. They believe in you because, you know, you're a great example as a successful black woman. And unfortunately, in Baltimore, that hasn't always paid dividends, because you can look at the people that came before you or that stood beside you on some of the biggest platforms in the city that were targeted, you know. And I want to know personally, what keeps you going? Because, you know, a lot of people will say, you know what, Marilyn, you know, you made enough money, you got a good husband, you know, you got 2 beautiful daughters, you know, just let it go, you know. And I think sometimes my mom, she passed away, tell me never give up. And that mantra to me resonates with you. Not necessarily because of anything that's been associated with your name or rumors that try to plague your career in a negative way, but just based on being black, we get tired, but we continue to fight. And I want to know, why do you do it?
So, I actually was part of one of the longest standing desegregation programs in the country. So I was in a busing program in Massachusetts. We had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, bus an hour out of the inner city of 5 in the morning, and bus out of the inner city of Boston to one of the richest towns in Massachusetts, where when I first started in 2nd grade with no teeth, I was the only black child, the only black child in the entire school. So imagine the doors closing and you going into an environment where you are exposed to the economic sort of disparities that exist in the educational system at 6, right? And so what I learned, having gone through that experience, is, you know, when the kids would walk up to me and be like, "You go, girl," right? Or say something stereotypical,
right?
You could easily be like, get mad or be like, "I don't talk like that." Well, you understand that the place that they're coming from is because of their lack of exposure. And so I had to like deal with that as a young child. And I remember, you know, I was like, you don't have, the only sort of perception that you have about black people come through the negative light of the media and through what they call and referred to us as the black kids on the bus, the Metco kids, right? And so what I learned and what I realized in that situation was, I'm going to give you a positive representation of what we are and what we do. So I was in honors classes. I was bringing, you know, diversity workshops to the school. But my yearbook quote, I was co-editor of the school newspaper, all of that stuff. My yearbook quote was by Nikki Giovanni, and it said, "I would not reject my strength, though it's not by choice, but responsibility." So you say, what keeps me going? I would say, 1, my faith, and then 2, the love that I have for my people, and ensuring that this country lives up to its ideals of equality and justice.
Now, what does Marilyn do after work or for fun? Because sometimes for me, I play chess, I like to play basketball, you know, whether it be music or etc. But what do you do, you know, when you're not working, when you're not, you know, defending the Constitution? What do you do?
When I'm not defending the Constitution.
Because I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, defend the Constitution and you seek justice. And I think, you know, some people got mad, and we can speak about that, you know, and live about the Freddie Gray prosecution. But I always say I'm interested in the person, because I know for a fact when you decide to do something else with your life, because you're still young, you still have a beautiful future ahead of you, and it might not be in politics or even dealing with, you know, prosecuting people on either side. You have a life. You know, you might want to play tennis. I don't know, but what does Marilyn like to do?
So I have 2 little girls, Marilyn and Naya. Marilyn just turned 13. She's going to high school
teenager.
next year. Yes. So on top of all this stress and drama, you can't tell nothing to Nick about his girls. But like, she's going to high school, so I'm dealing with attitudes. And then my little one is 11. She's turning 12, so she's preteen. And so, you know, I like to spend time with my girls because they've ultimately made the biggest sacrifice. Both me and my husband are public servants. We're constantly in the news, and sometimes, you know, it's close to election season, so it's really like negative. And so we try to spend time with the girls. I think what we also like to do is to try to travel and like get away sometimes every now and then. In the summertime, we would try to take the girls away because they're constantly, you know, at our disposal, and they're around our schedule, and we're constantly giving and giving and giving to the community. I try to go back to the girls.
So you spoke about the media and how negative they have been or always are in terms of telling stories that doesn't always reflect the truth. And I think they try to curb the narrative because they really can't change it, because sometimes it's not their story that they're telling, they're reporting someone else's story and they add a twist to it. Do you watch the news?
No, I don't watch it. Because what I learned, having gone through Freddie Gray, right, and you gotta think about this, during Freddie Gray, this was pre-Trump. And once I charged the police officers, I had like so many people globally, and there was like this whole campaign. It was called Red Nation Rising. And it was Twitter before Twitter was Twitter, right? This is 2015. And they were talking about hanging me. They were talking about, I mean, saying all kinds of stuff. So like you get hate mail, you get death threats, you get the police officers in that case sued me. They literally were coming from my law license since the day that I charged those police officers. And so when you think about like just the attacks, you learn how to not internalize it, right? And the best way for me not to internalize the hatred and the nasty things that people are emboldened to say to you, even as you're a public servant, is to not watch it, right? I don't let it affect me. I don't look at the news. I try to stay focused.
I mean, to me, you are strong and you're resilient, and I think you do a wonderful job of not having these smear campaigns. And I follow you, in spirit, because sometimes we don't always get a chance to interact like this. But and I apologize if I get emotional, because but it bothers me when I see people come at you as though like you're a bad person. I know sometimes like we all make mistakes, but I know it's not fair. So sometimes as a black man, and you spoke about doing stuff in the community, we can't do enough to protect our own. And if you was working at Rite Aid, I would feel the same way. And sometimes people want us to fall and want us to lose because they can't win. And you spoke about politics and business people who have money, and they speak values to people who are ignorant or don't necessarily know how things work. But for me, what I want to know about you being a mom and a daughter, because they're the things I cherish the most, because they're the things you're going to walk away with. Yeah. And you're going to be more than a hashtag regardless of what happens during the election, because I learned even when I tried to be a beacon of hope for my community, because I wanted young men to see what change looked like. Because it wasn't for the Marilyn, Mosbys, the Stokeys, people wouldn't understand exactly what it is to be in the political spectrum and take the heat. I myself am a crybaby. I worry about my children, so I try to do my best to protect them, because I know for a fact they don't understand what is going on. And I have a young son that's 9 years old and one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, and it was because of him that I wanted to become a beacon of hope in terms of politics. I don't want to be a politician. I just want to be someone to say, listen, this is what you can do other than what I used to do. And if I don't show them, then a lot of people won't or can't say they don't know what it's like. Because a lot of guys who mom died of AIDS, father wasn't their life in prison, I can attest to all those stories. But for me, you did what probably anybody would want to do. You followed your dream, your passion, you were successful. And unfortunately, we live in a city where as though Baltimore has always been known for four things. It was the Ravens, it was Heron, it was the Wire, and it was Crabs. Now it's the Uprising. And you spoke about Freddie Gray. As a prosecutor, the night before you went to bed, what was the last thing you thought about doing, and the first thing you did when you woke up before you prosecuted them guys? Did you pray? Did you say, no, I gotta do this for Baltimore? These young men and women who was responsible for the death of Freddie Gray has to be prosecuted. That had to have been tough, because the world was watching, and and all that pressure on your shoulders. But I think anyone in your position could say they would have did something different, or they did the same thing. But you did what Marilyn thought she had to do at that moment. What made you say, no, I have to do this?
So I live in the heart of West Baltimore. I say it all the time. Actually, CVS is around the corner from me. Right? Like, I don't have to turn on the news. I don't have to open up the newspaper to see violence plaguing our community. All I have to do is open up our door. And in that instance where, to be honest with you, I feel like I have followed my passion, right? And that is to apply one standard of justice. And maybe I was idealistic in that moment, but when I saw that videotape, I not only had to push against, I didn't know it was going to be as bad as it was, right, but I had to push against the individuals in my office, right? Prosecuting police and prosecutors, like that just did not happen. And so when I sent my prosecutors out and was like, this is not adding up, what they're telling us is not adding up. I need you to send someone out there and to do our own independent investigation outside of the scope of the purview of the police department, because what they're saying doesn't make sense. I wasn't anticipating the backlash, right? But I was just following what I believed to be the right thing to do, and I wouldn't do anything different. You know, that accountability needed to be had. It wasn't being had in this country. That accountability ultimately led to exposure. A week after I charged those officers, the Department of Justice came in, exposed a pattern of practice of discriminatory enforcement of the 8th largest police department in the country. That exposure ultimately led to reform. We had a spotlight on the entrenched police corruption. I don't know if you've seen HBO. I haven't seen it. I don't watch it. I don't get along with the person who wrote it. But in any event, that exposure ultimately led to reform, right? And now we have a federally enforceable consent decree. And so, yes, I get in that moment, I followed the facts with the law, and I was idealistic about what would happen. You know, I didn't, and when I dropped the charges, one of the things I was very clear about, unless we have police accountability reform in this country, I can try this case 100 times and it's going to end up with the same result.
And it's funny because, I mean, I know a little about the law, even in the jurisprudence, and I know in layman terms, you know, what defending the Constitution consists of, you know. Nowhere near like you, but I understand that if it probably wasn't for prosecuting those police, we wouldn't have the consent decree. I understand that there was a lot of unconstitutional arrests.
Or the Department of Justice report.
Exactly, and a lot of improprieties going on, but I feel as though that was something that had to take place at that time to stop the bleeding. Moving forward, we had corruption and things of that like, and I'm not saying that it stopped because those guys went to prison.
Right.
Because I understand that's like anything you do in life, but I think sometimes when people stand up to people, it's a must that you have people that are thorough, respectful, and honorable and doing the right thing. And nothing I think you did was malicious. So that was, to me, I always focused on people's intent. We spoke about the news, Fox, and other people, you know, and I feel like there's so much other things that could be covered in Baltimore City, but they want to sit outside 2 people's homes and follow 2 people and keep talking because they want to change the narrative, you know. And I think that people have the last say so. And that's why I want to get engaged, get involved, and tell stories about how I remember seeing you at a recreation center, you know, happy, you know, and you were smiling. And I know right now it's not easy being you because, you know, I don't know how it feels to be you. I know I used to be in a situation where as though I don't want you to be in, and I understand exactly what that consists of as well. But like today, when I look at Marilyn Mosby, in maybe 3 years, 3 months, where do you see yourself in terms of all the things you learned, all the things you overcame? Teenage daughters, you know what I'm saying? Will there ever be a time when you say, you know what, this is what I need to focus on now? I understand. I fought the fight. I fought the fight for the people of Baltimore, Maryland, wherever it may be. And now I want to do something different because, I mean, I say you're very popular. I think you have a job lined up from here to Hollywood because you have, you know, that swag. You know, I got to use that word to really hold your own in any endeavor that I can think of that you want to take on. You know, but is there a time when you say, you know what, you know, I'm planning for my future in terms of less stressful obligations?
So I think, yes, there's gonna come a point. I mean, I graduated from a top 25 law school. I could be making a whole lot of more money than I'm making, but I've also been impassioned about this. And it goes back to that quote, I would not reject my strength, though it's not by choice, but responsibility. There's so much more that needs to take place when it comes to the racial inequities within the criminal justice system. And I can honestly say it wasn't just the police accountability. We have since prosecuted, successfully convicted 30 police officers since Freddie Gray, right? We talk about some of the accomplishments of my office. We've created a sentencing review unit that is the only sentencing review at Prince George's County as one as well, but where we're modifying the sentences of juvenile lifers in the elderly prison population and making recommendations for parole because we know that this system disproportionately impacts Black people, especially in the city of Baltimore. I created the first conviction integrity unit out of the state's attorney's office in the entire state of Maryland, where we do reinvestigations into claims of innocence, actual innocence. We've exonerated 12 innocent Black men who have cumulatively served 300 years in prison for crimes they did not commit. So we have so much. I mean, when you look at the policies that we've implemented, my office was one of the first in the country to say we're going to stop prosecuting marijuana. You know why? Because guess what? It's being discriminately enforced against poor black and brown people. You're 4 times more likely. There's no disparate use among white and black people when it comes to consumption. But in America, you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for mere possession. In the city of Baltimore, you were 6 times more likely. And even after they decriminalized 10 grams or less of marijuana, where the officers were responsible for issuing citations, 42% of the citations that they were issuing, 42% were being issued in 1 out of 9 police districts. What district do you think that was? Ours.
Central?
Nope, Western.
Western,
which happens to be 95% black and disproportionately impoverished. What I've been clear about is that the war on drugs was failed war on black people. We know that. It was a successful war on black people because it decimated our communities. But what I've also said is that as a state attorney, I will never be complicit in that type of discriminatory enforcement of laws against poor black and brown people.
Now, being married to Nick, who gives the best advice? Because see, now I don't know if Nick was a lawyer but I know he's in the politics. I remember he was city council for Mara, one of the best. And
he loves you to pieces.
And it's funny because I was telling his assistant Dave, me and Nick fell out because sometimes I told you when you was on the panel for mental health, sometimes you do things out of ignorance and not out of thought. And when my support was lackluster, it wasn't because of my intent, right? And me and Nick, he was there in terms of everything I did on the playground. Y'all would come up. And that's people I know. See, I can't get into the weeds of what people want to describe on TV because I don't know none of that. I remember him riding up and you guys come out watching me, put on summer events for my community, But when you guys in the house and I guess he has a stressful day or you have a stressful day, who gives the best advice? Because he's the city council president, you're the state's attorney, and so both of you guys are here. And somebody has to have a subordinate role. Now, I'm not saying gender shouldn't take place, but he is the husband, he's the wife. But
come on, Stokey. Who? Happy wife, happy life. Come on, let's just be real, okay?
Right. But like, 'cause I look at Nick. Like Nick has his plate forward too, dealing with a lot of things in Baltimore City politics. And again, I voted for Nick. I wanted Nick to win because I felt like Nick had experience. When he left the first time, I think as a senator in Annapolis. But I feel like we need more people that are like us. See, for me, it's this nostalgic approach that a lot of people take, and they vote for familiarity. They vote for famous people, but who have been doing the worst job forever.
It's frustrating because I can tell you, just in the city of Baltimore, I have some great colleagues, but there are a lot of folks here that will pull the wool over your eyes, and just because they're blackface doesn't mean that they have, the best sort of intentions for our community. And what you have in the city of Baltimore is you have a lot of folks that have been pulling the wool over people's eyes for a very long time, which is why our communities look the way that they do.
A lot of people wanted you to run for mayor when Stephanie resigned, and they were looking for a leader and not a politician. And I think that's why your name kept coming up. And I think today, living in Baltimore, being of age, we need more leaders. And this upcoming election, I know it's important, but I think it'll be a third term.
It'll be my
third term. And I think, every time that you're running, it's always like, it's your race to lose. So because you're so popular and everyone knows that.
I was so popular. Let me just be candid though. We did some polling recently, right? And what you got to think about it, everything that they've done to me. I told you the mocking, the ridicule, and the investigations. For the past 2 years, they have had me under scrutiny. I've been investigated by the State Board of Elections, by the OIG, I've been by the State Ethics Commission, now the federal government, right? The federal government literally went through every aspect of my life for the past 2 years. And then they come back with this perjury and mortgage fraud where, again, every single one of these investigations that I've ever gone through, I've been victorious. I know I've done nothing wrong, so I know I'll be victorious, but this was with the person that's leading this investigation donated to my political opponents, both of them that are now running against me. And so he has political and personal animus, and what I know is that this is about me. They want me out of office. When I came out with my COVID policies, we stopped prosecuting, sex work, possession of drugs, right? This is beyond marijuana, it's possession of drugs. We can still prosecute drug dealers, but possession of drugs. Let's treat it as the public health crisis that you treat it as in the suburbs. You know why? Because I'm gonna use my power and my discretion as a state's attorney to ensure there's equity, right? And so let's have the behavioral health experts respond to the behavioral health needs of those individuals. When I came out with those policies, one of the biggest treatment facilities, I'm not going to name the name, put in an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun and said, because of Marilyn Mosby, we're going to go bankrupt. No, because you built your business model off the backs of black and brown people, change your business model in the city of Baltimore, right? So when you do stuff like that, and I'll say this, Scotland is now modeling our policies. London is looking into modeling our policies. We just got an email from Kosovo. They want to come and interview us based off of our policies. And so when you have that and you challenge the status quo, you take on the prison privatization and the prison pipeline,
like prison, like that's real.
It's real. And so when you do that, you become a target, you become an enemy, and that's what they've done to me for the past 2 years. They vilified me over and over and over and over again, and it's taken an effect. I looked at the polls. I'm running neck and neck with someone who is morally inept, but and that should not be the case. The thing that's really scary is the people, my opponents that are running against me, right? Like, you look at the policies that we've implemented, and again, they were implemented to ensure racial equity within the criminal justice system. These offenses have nothing to do with public safety, but we know that it lessens the engagement among communities of color and police. So we were stuck at home when we saw George Floyd, who allegedly passed a counterfeit bill during global pandemic for groceries and ends up dead. Dante Wright either had air fresheners in his rearview mirror or expired tags. So did I during global pandemic. Motor Vehicle Association was shut down.
Couldn't go,
right. And so when you look at these minor offenses, and Johns Hopkins has come out and supported my policies and basically said that because of these policies, we've averted the arrest, 80% of which would have been black people, one. So we know it was going to be discriminately enforced. And two, there's a 1% recidivism rate, meaning these individuals aren't reoffending. So this idea and concept that because of my policies, this has everything to do with the trigger pullers or the violence, it's not true. And so when you have two opponents in the race right now, one I would argue is beholden to fraternal order of police, and one that I would argue is a hypocrite to the extent that he will avail himself of the policies, but intends to repeal the policies. He's the major beneficiary, driving on a suspended license, asking police officers to turn off their body-worn cameras, going above and beyond. We don't know whether or not it was sex work or not on Greenmount Avenue, but, besides all of that. And then you got the other one who, stood with the fraternal of police and said that I shouldn't have charged the police officers and Freddie Gray. They've both gone on the record and said they're going to repeal these policies. And then when you look at these individuals, they're backed by Fox, and they're backed by Governor Hogan and Governor Hogan's PAC. So we gotta be smart. And the one thing I will say, we're 6 weeks from my election, is that these people have come for me because they understood that I had the power of the people who believed in me in this city, who still believe in me in this city. That is more intimidating to them than anything else. I've always been outraged when it came to election time, but they could never get the people who supported me and who backed me, and that's why they have run my name through the dirt for the past 2 years. 7 years.
What is your relationship with the mayor?
So I work with 4 mayors and 5 police commissioners in 6 years. Think about that. That's 5 commissioners, 5 different crime plans, 5 different command staff, right? 4 mayors with 4 different priorities. I work with everybody to implement their crime plan, but at the end of the day, I'm a prosecutor, so I want you to hold me to account by what we do in the courtroom. I go beyond just the courtroom in that I think we need a holistic sort of approach to crime, and so I have a crime control and prevention division, the only out of a state's attorney's office, where we focus on young people and ensuring that we can break that school to prison pipeline and we get to them before they get to the criminal justice system. We have the sentencing review, we have conviction integrity, because our mission as prosecutors, vision of a prosecutor is justice over convictions. That's not the typical prosecutor's office.
And they say you better let a guilty person go than like an innocent person. I read something about that when I was thinking about it.
I would never, if you met the men who have spent 36 years in prison for crimes they didn't commit. My first exoneree was a man by the name of Malcolm Bryant, and He spent 17 years in prison for a murder he didn't commit. He was exonerated. We felt so great. We were like, yes, he can start his life all over again. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I met with that family 3 months after he was exonerated and released. He died from trying to get reacclimated into society. He couldn't get an ID. He couldn't get, a job. He had no mental health treatment. And so what we did as a result of that, and his mother and his sister sat down with me and said, please, I know, he was just a totally different person, but they need mental health treatment coming out. And so I started Resurrection After Exoneration, where we partner with the University of Maryland. We provide social workers, life skills, financial skills. They have a support group that they meet once a month so that they can get reacclimated into society. We went to Annapolis and fought for them to get mandatory compensation. After spending 36 years in life, your loved ones have died, and you never compensate these men?
Yeah, see, the recidivism is real, and a lot of people are hopeless and desensitized, and when they come home from prison, they feel as though they black and they have a record. There are no good jobs, so they go back to what they know, create bad habits. Yep. So I asked you about the mayor. What is your relationship with Commissioner Harrison? And before you answer that, he's not from Baltimore. When he came to Baltimore, myself and a few other people tried to get him acclimated with how to use community individuals to help, not necessarily change police policies, but help create a new moratorium where we can come together and help him understand what we're good at. Because I understand from both sides of the street that you can't do it without the community. You need people, and I'm not saying as far as telling or this, I'm saying you gotta get people that's respected, that's trusted, and that someone can walk up to, because it's been things I have done with the police to help people get jobs, and stay out of trouble, not go to jail. So I say, we turn them around, we don't try to turn them in.
Right.
But from my understanding, sometimes when you don't know how something works, you can't fix it.
Absolutely.
And I always say I let paint is paint, because you're not going to see me chasing it. If someone breaks their leg, I'm gonna call the ambulance. If your car breaks down, which you don't drive, but
I do drive.
You'll call a mechanic. But for me, I never understood why they don't do more in terms of reaching out to people that have been vetted and trusted in the community that can help them. Because there's a lot of things that I think could do Baltimore very well if they just, I'm gonna say, tuck the pride. You don't gotta put it away, just tuck it a little bit and ask people who know how things work to help. Because regardless of where the money allocated, I know we can't lock away about this problem, and you spoke about, recidivism, and I think that's a real problem, because a lot of guys come home who can't get a job, and one of the reasons why I know that's a real story, because I face those guys all the time. And I always say, if I had the antidote, I can stop it, but I can't go to every corner and say, got the corner, and don't give them nothing, And I know for a fact, when you not necessarily minimize arresting people, prosecuting people, you have long-term scopes in mind, And I think when the relationship that you have with him, whether it be something that's, professional, or personal, I think is one that has to work for you, only because you don't want nobody bringing you frivolous things and say, listen, save me. Because
right.
that's what I think they want people to do. Want you to save them, because, of the reputation that I see every single day of the Baltimore City Police before you even took office, And I think sometimes people do a good job of trying to mask the problems of corruption and, again, false imprisonment, and want you to prosecute these cases. So when you don't have evidence to substantiate a conviction, oh, wow, someone's not doing their job. What is it like working with him?
So what I will say is that, we have a professional relationship. I think he has a very difficult job because he's attempting to reform an entire police department, over 2,000 police officers. But what's harder than getting to those officers individually is the culture that exists within that police department. And where we've gone wrong in the city of Baltimore, in my opinion, is that we want instant sort of results, right?
Correct.
And so we've had 5 police commissioners. You cannot, and no corporation, no government entity, no business can run and actually progress with that type of instability. And that's what we've had as a city. So he has a very difficult job. He's under a federal consent decree. He's trying to change a culture in policing, because the policing, that culture is real, right? And we saw that through the GTTF scandal, where you had rogue officers planting guns and drugs on citizens. There was, we had zero tolerance policing, which my opponents want to go back to. They want to resort back to, right? Where you were for locking thousands of black men up for petty offenses. And they had the broken windows theory. Oh, well, we have to do this minor crime because that leads to bigger crime, even though there's no data to support that. And so what I think he's up against is that culture, and he has to change that culture, which is a really difficult task. We work well together, but I work well with everybody, even the new commissioners that came out and endorsed my opponent, all of them. The old commissioner, the one responsible for the way in which the current state of the city of Baltimore and the corruption that exists, they all endorsed my opponent, which I was glad to see. It wasn't me.
Yeah, so he comes from New Orleans. I think in New Orleans they had the consent decree. And I think that was one of the reasons I think he probably was hired to, help.
Because he has experience with it, right?
And I again, I pray for different things, because I know sometimes it's not about success. Sometimes it's about, to me, solutions. Because I know ultimately Baltimore has to go through with I'll call a wheelbarrow effect. We got to kind of wind our way out of this, because we have so many good people here. Baltimore, to me, and I love this city. It's one of many cities that's like has its own language, its own lingo. We have our own culture in itself. But unfortunately, we don't have the love, I think, and it's the policies aside that we need to integrate into the city on a daily basis. Because like the Preakness, everybody's so happy. I wish we had the Preakness every single day. I wish the Ravens could play every day, because we come together for those causes, and we rep Baltimore in our individual and official capacity. But sometimes, to me, looking on the outside, looking in when I'm not here, I say, damn, why can't we be like this? Why we can't be like that? I just think that being a leader like you are, I think, in my own opinion, which probably don't carry weight, you have been unfairly targeted by certain media outlets and the federal government as a whole, without me even knowing the logistics or all the information is concerning this investigation. Because I know that the power that be seems like they always target successful black people. Reverend Jamal Bryant said something on his page to some guys he went to see in prison. He said every successful black person, whether it be Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, had to go through some type of dealing with the law. They try to use that as a backbreak, But I just want to thank you, for what you're doing. I thank you for spending time with me. That means a lot to me. To me, when people make time, that says a lot. I always tell people don't care about how much you know, they care about how much you care. And for you to spend time with me and use this platform to tell a little about yourself, and hopefully people will get a better idea of who you are as a person. That's what I pray for.
I appreciate it, Stokey. I was gonna just say one thing, because you reminded me, you talked about Malcolm X and the media, and one of the things that comes to mind is what he said was this is the media, and irresponsible media. It will make the criminal look like he's the victim and make the victim look like he's the criminal. If you aren't careful, the media will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. And so I just will tell you that. I'll leave you with that, and I just want to encourage those that are watching, please get out and vote. Like, they are coming, and there's a reason why. This is an incredibly important election. It's going to have national implications, because let me be clear, if they're able to get me out of office, that sends a message to every other progressive prosecutor throughout this country who will have the courage to do what I've done. Whether it's holding police officers accountable, coming out with policies to ensure racial equity in the criminal justice system. People are not going to do it because they are attempting to make an example out of me. And so we need to be smart. We need to get out here and vote. And we gotta know that don't let these folks pull the wool over your eyes, because that's what they're attempting to do.
And again, I appreciate you for one, being thorough, respectful, and you kept your word with me. You came through. And I was telling my friend this morning, I said, it's big for me. It's big for me because I get a chance to actually sit next to people who, and this couch is not real, but I don't know too many couches you sat on and gave yourself, in terms of telling your truth, and I appreciate that. So I wish you the best. I'm praying for you, your family. I want the best for you. And I always say anything I can do in my individual official capacity, man, to defeat those odds. You know, I'm with you. You know, and again, you know, I really appreciate you being that strong black woman who my daughters can look up and say, you know what, no matter what happened to me, no matter how many times I felt, I'm gonna get up like Marilyn and keep going. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.